Chapter 3973. As soon as Lu Ming and Sui arrived at Kuandong Planet, they saw a general in armor leading an army to welcome them. The two of them were welcomed into a military camp. "Brother Su, please have a seat." The general in armor was called Brother Hao. He was very polite to Sui and led him to the seat of honor. However, he was much colder to Lu Ming. Sui had the strength of the top of the fourth godly emperor layer, and he looked very young. He was definitely a genius. Such a person would be very beneficial to Kuandong Planet. However, Lu Ming was only at the first level of the Divine Emperor realm. In their opinion, he was dispensable. He would not be of any help to the battle on Kuandong Planet. He didn't understand why the Heavenly Palace had sent a cultivator of the first godly emperor layer to Kuandong Planet. He was just a hindrance. Of course, he could only suppress these doubts and dissatisfaction in his heart. He did not dare to voice them out. However, he could not help but express his dissatisfaction through his actions. For example, he was not very enthusiastic towards Lu Ming. Lu Ming noticed that, but he didn't take it to heart. He just sat down and drank. "Brother Hao, what's the situation on Kuandong Planet?" Sui casually sat at the head of the table and asked. Then, a beautiful maid poured wine for him. "The east side of Kuandong Planet is occupied by the Yunhua Pavilion, and the west side is occupied by the Fei Xing sect. But the most important wormhole is in the west. We've attacked it a few times, but we haven't been able to take it," said Brother Hao. "What kind of strong cultivators do they have?" asked Sui. "They have 2 cultivators of the top of the 5th godly emperor layer. They're very strong. We only have 2 cultivators of the top of the 5th godly emperor layer. We don't have the advantage. The other strong cultivators are fighting everywhere, especially in Feiyun. It's difficult to send them out," said Brother Hao. "Only the top of the 5th godly emperor layer? That's easy." After Sui heard this, he revealed a confident expression. Brother Hao's eyes twinkled. "Do you have a solution?" "Of course, if they only have the strength of the 5th godly emperor layer, I'm strong enough to fight against them," Sui said proudly. Brother Hao was amazed and said, "Prince Sui only has the strength of the 4th godly emperor layer, but he can compete with cultivators of the 5th godly emperor layer." "Ha ha, I wouldn't dare. Of course, that's not enough. I have a secret treasure that can injure cultivators of the 5th godly emperor layer. With that, I can kill cultivators of the 5th godly emperor layer as easily as killing chickens." Sui said he didn't dare, but he looked very proud of himself. At the same time, he said he had a trump card which could only be used once. It could injure cultivators of the 5th godly emperor layer. Hearing that, the smile on Brother Hao's face grew wider. At the side, the others also flattered Sui. From beginning to end, they had neglected Lu Ming. A cultivator of the 1st godly emperor layer couldn't do anything. Besides, he couldn't become a celestial soldier, so why should they care? "It's not the right time to attack. We'll wait for the Pavilion Master's order. As soon as the Pavilion Master gives the order, we'll immediately launch an attack and take down the entire Kuandong Planet in one fell swoop," Brother Hao said. Sui nodded and ended the meeting. Lu Ming didn't say anything. He just sat there and slowly sipped his wine. To be honest, the wine was really good. Lu Ming couldn't help but drink a few more cups. Brother Hao and the others disdained Lu Ming even more. They thought that Lu Ming knew that he was weak, so he didn't say anything. After the meeting, Lu Ming went back to his room and sat down cross-legged. A bone pearl appeared in his hand. That bone pearl was the container that Gu Mo used to seal the ancient secret skills and other secret skills of the demon path. Before, Lu Ming was in a hurry, so he didn't have time to open it. Now, he had time to open it. According to Gu Mo's instructions, Lu Ming used a special talisman to inject it into the bone pearl. After a short time, the bone pearl emitted dazzling lights. Then, talismans flew out of it. There were at least a few hundred talismans. Most of them were black talismans, but one of them was black gold in color. It was very eye-catching. Lu Ming grabbed the black gold jade talisman with his hand and sank his spiritual sense into it. One of the 3,000 ancient secret skills, the great demonic sword technique. Lu Ming whispered, but to be honest, he was a little disappointed. The great demonic sword technique was also an offensive secret skill. However, Lu Ming already had the great shattering technique and the great god wind technique. Another one wouldn't be of much help to him. However, he still had to cultivate. No matter what kind of secret skill it was, Lu Ming had to cultivate it. This was to lay the foundation for his future. However, it wasn't easy to cultivate the ancient secret skill. Lu Ming planned to find a chance to cultivate it later. Lu Ming memorized the great demonic sword technique, and then looked at the other secret skills. There were more than 300 demon secret skills. Moreover, Lu Ming hadn't cultivated many demon secret skills before. Therefore, there were 300 demon secret skills that Lu Ming hadn't cultivated before. Lu Ming was overjoyed. He collected all of them, and would cultivate them when he had time. After collecting them, Lu Ming took out some elvenwood hearts and began to absorb them to strengthen his foundation. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. After a month of cultivation, Lu Ming's cultivation level was completely stabilized. He had completely stabilized at the first godly emperor layer. Compared to when I just broke through, my strength has increased by 50%. Lu Ming smiled. When he fought against Yin Zhioling in the dark pit demon mountain, he had just broken through and his strength hadn't reached the peak yet. Now, his cultivation level had completely stabilized and his strength had reached the peak. He was 50% stronger than when he was in the dark pit demon mountain. Now, he was confident that he wouldn't be so embarrassed if he fought against Yin Zhioling again. He alone was enough to fight against him. He didn't need to team up with fighting god Yuanwen. After stabilizing his cultivation level, Lu Ming planned to start cultivating the demon's secret skills. However, at this time, Lu Ming received news from Brother Hao that they were about to launch an attack. He could only cultivate the secret skills later. Lu Ming left his residence and went to the barracks with Su Yi to set off with the army. This time, we have the help of the emissary of the Heavenly Palace. We will definitely destroy the Flying Star sect. Now, let's go and take Kuandong Star! Brother Hao shouted. Victory! At least 100,000 soldiers shouted. Swoosh! The 100,000 soldiers were all experts. They turned into rainbow lights and flew to the west of Kuandong Star. It was a very spectacular sight. They were very fast and soon arrived at the west of Kuandong Star. However, there was a strong divine light flickering in front of them, illuminating the starry sky. In front of them, there was a large army blocking their way. This army was naturally the army of the Flying Star sect. They had already known that the Yunhua Pavilion was about to attack and had made defensive preparations in advance. Chapter 3974. The Flying Star sect's army was lined up neatly, blotting out the sky and blotting out the earth. There were at least 100,000 of them. The two armies hadn't even collided yet, but their terrifying chi had already collided. Boom! The atmosphere shook violently as a terrifying crack appeared in the sky. It looked like a ferocious mouth had appeared in the sky. Die! Destroy the Flying Star sect! Shouted Brother Hao furiously. He took the lead and charged towards the Flying Star sect's army. Die! Shouted the Yunhua Pavilion's army. All sorts of godly lights dazzled as all sorts of weapons rose up in the air. In the end, they turned into a terrifying force and moved towards the Flying Star sect's army. However, the Flying Star sect's army also released all sorts of attacks and collided with the Yunhua Pavilion's army. After a series of explosions, the distance between the two armies was reduced. Horrible shrieks filled the air as the two armies collided. At least a few hundred people were killed. Blood dyed the sky red. Die! There was a long howl that was exceptionally sharp and bright. Sui was surrounded by dazzling godly lights. In front of him, 3 swords were floating. Those 3 swords looked like the feathers of an eagle. Actually, they were made from the feathers of an extremely strong cultivator of the Heavenly Eagle clan. They were extremely sharp. The illusory figure brushed past the 3 divine swords and continued its killing spree. Every time it flickered, a few people would be pierced by the divine swords or split into 2 halves. Sui moved forwards and killed dozens of strong cultivators of the Flying Star sect. No matter if they were cultivators of the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd godly emperor layer, they were all killed instantly. Of course, the strong cultivators of the Flying Star sect noticed him. "Little boy, die!" shouted a cultivator of the 4th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect. He stared at Sui and attacked him. That person was surrounded by starlight. He waved his hand and starlight turned into a sword which descended from the sky and pierced towards Sui's head. "You want to die?" Sui smiled coldly. He waved his sword and the starlight battle sword broke apart. Then, his 3 swords shot out and appeared in front of the cultivator of the 4th godly emperor layer of the Flying Star sect. The cultivator of the Flying Star sect was astonished. He hastily used all sorts of skills to block the attack, but it was useless. Slash! Sui's battle sword directly pierced through all of his defenses, piercing 3 transparent holes in his dantian, chest, and glabella. The cultivator of the 4th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect had died instantly. How strong! When the people of the Yunue Pavilion saw how strong Sui was, instantly killing people of the same level as him, their morale soared. Ao roared and charged at Sui. Brother Hao's Chi, L. Sui's battle prowess was indeed strong. It was not wrong to say that he could fight those above his level. At this moment, Lu Ming's performance was neither fast nor slow. He charged forward with the army and did not stand out. Sui was in high spirits as he charged towards Brother Hao. At that moment, Brother Hao was fighting against a general of the top of the 5th godly emperor layer. Sui brushed past the 3 swords and fiercely slashed at the general. The general of the Flying Star sect was wielding a battle saber that glittered with starlight. With a loud roar, he swung his saber at Sui's 3 divine swords. Clang! Clang! A violent collision broke out, and energy waves spread in all directions. The Flying Star sect's general and Sui were forced to retreat. They were evenly matched. The people from the Yunue Pavilion and the Flying Star sect were all shocked. In the Divine Emperor realm, the gap between each level was huge. It was extremely difficult to fight against someone of a higher level. But Sui, with the strength of the 4th godly emperor layer, was able to fight against the general of the top of the 5th godly emperor layer. They had never seen such a genius before. They were all dumbfounded. Brother Hao was the first to react. He was overjoyed. With a roar, he charged toward the general of the Flying Star sect. Whoosh! Whoosh! Sui also joined forces with Brother Hao. Suddenly, the Flying Star sect's general was forced to retreat again and again. He only had the strength to defend himself, and was unable to fight back. The other cultivator of the 5th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect was fighting against a cultivator of the 5th godly emperor layer from the Yunue Pavilion. The Flying Star sect was in a bad situation. Boom! At that moment, a tall and sturdy man wearing armor from the Flying Star sect suddenly had the strength of the 4th godly emperor layer. He suddenly had the strength of the 5th godly emperor layer. He was holding a spear, and it moved like a bolt of lightning. He was fighting against a cultivator of the 4th godly emperor layer from the Yunue Pavilion. He was startled and hastily dodged. But in the godly emperor layer, the difference of 1 godly emperor layer was overwhelming. Slash! The cultivator of the 4th godly emperor layer from the Yunue Pavilion was instantly killed. Then, he turned into a beam of light and moved towards Sui. Sui had no choice but to give up on the general of the Flying Star sect and fight against him. How come you have a cultivator of the 5th godly emperor layer? Brother Hao was astonished. The Flying Star sect and the Yunue Pavilion were fighting on the battlefield. It was difficult for them to send out strong cultivators. How come they suddenly had a cultivator of the 5th godly emperor layer? Could it be that something had happened on the battlefield? They're from the Fiyun continent, of course. They're waiting for the big fish, smiled the general of the Flying Star sect coldly. Boom! At that moment, a powerful chi rose up in the air from the Flying Star sect. Surprisingly, another cultivator of the fifth godly emperor layer appeared and threw himself at Sui. It's over! At that moment, the faces of the Yunhua Pavilion's army turned deathly pale. The enemy had hidden so many strong cultivators in their army. They had 2 more cultivators of the fifth godly emperor layer than they had expected. That kind of fighting strength was enough to turn the situation around. Were the Yunhua Pavilion going to suffer a crushing defeat? You want to die! At that moment, Sui coldly shouted. His eyes revealed a gloomy expression. At the same time, 2 black beads appeared in his hand. Within the 2 black beads were strands of lightning flickering. I didn't want to use them, but since you want to die, I'll help you, said Sui icily. Then, he threw the 2 pearls at them. Boom boom! The 2 pearls exploded and released lightning. In a flash, the 2 cultivators of the 4th godly emperor layer were engulfed by the lightning. Around them, some other strong cultivators were also engulfed by the lightning. They didn't even have time to scream before they turned into ashes. When the lightning disappeared, 2 silhouettes were blown away. Their clothes were tattered and their chi was extremely weak. It was the 2 cultivators of the 5th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect. At that moment, they were severely injured and their chi was extremely weak. When Brother Hao and the others saw that, they were extremely happy. Sui had said that he had a weapon that could injure cultivators of the top of the 5th godly emperor layer. Chapter 3975. Die! Shouted Sui furiously after injuring the 2 cultivators of the 5th godly emperor layer. Then, he threw himself at the 2 cultivators of the 5th godly emperor layer. Help! Shouted the 2 cultivators of the 5th godly emperor layer. No one can save you! Smiled Sui coldly. Little boy, you want to die! As soon as Sui finished his sentence, a loud roar could be heard coming from the Flying Star sect. Following this, several terrifying auras rose into the sky. There were a total of 3 auras, and they were extremely terrifying. As soon as the auras appeared, a few beams of divine light shot towards Sui. That's 6th godly emperor layer! Suyi's face turned pale with fright. He hastily made his 3 swords fly out and collide with the 3 beams of godly light. Although the 3 divine lights were blocked, Suyi's 3 divine swords were also beaten until they lost their luster. They flew out, and no one knew where they flew to. Swoosh! Swoosh! 3 tall and sturdy silhouettes appeared from the Flying Star sect. They were surrounded by starlight. 6th godly emperor layer! Shouted Brother Hao furiously. Not only were there cultivators of the 5th godly emperor layer in the enemy's camp, but there were also cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer. It was over! At that moment, they could only put their hopes on Sui. They hoped that he could create a miracle and save the situation. Otherwise, the Yunhua Pavilion's army would be in danger. Sui pulled a long face when he saw the 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer coming towards him. He clenched his teeth and took out 5 black orbs from his storage ring. He only had 7 of those Tai Chi lightning pearls. He had already used 2 of them, so he only had 5 left. He hoped he could injure the cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer of the Flying Star sect. He waved his hand and threw the 5 pearls at them. 5 explosions sounded as the 5 pearls exploded. The 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer and a few hundred people from the Flying Star sect were trapped inside, including the 2 cultivators of the 5th godly emperor layer who had been seriously injured. Lightning filled the air and the people from the Flying Star sect who were trapped inside were turned into ashes. However, 3 figures managed to rush out of the range of the lightning. It was the 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer. Their godly lights were dim, and some parts of their bodies were burnt. They had been injured by the Tai Chi lightning pearl. However, his injuries were not serious. The Tai Chi lightning pearl could injure cultivators of the 5th godly emperor layer, but it couldn't harm cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer. However, apart from the cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer, the cultivators of the Flying Star sect, including the 2 cultivators of the 5th godly emperor layer, were all dead. The 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer were furious. "Kill that brat! That kid is dead for sure! Kill!" The 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer were furious and threw themselves at Su Yi. Su Yi's expression changed drastically, revealing a look of fear as he turned around and ran. He was strong enough to fight against cultivators of the 5th godly emperor layer, but against cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer, he would die instantly, let alone 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer. A pair of wings extended from his back, flapping wildly as he fled for his life. However, he wasn't as fast as the cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer. They were getting closer and closer to him. "Stop them! I order you to stop them!" Sui charged into the Yunhua Pavilion's army and roared at the Yunhua Pavilion. But the people of the Yunhua Pavilion didn't dare stop the cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer. Therefore, the people of the Yunhua Pavilion moved to the sides. "Fuck!" shouted Sui furiously. His hands turned into talons, and he grabbed a few people of the Yunhua Pavilion and threw them at the 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer of the Flying Star sect. His goal was to delay them so that he could escape. The people of the Yunhua Pavilion who were thrown away gave horrible shrieks as the 3 cultivators of the Flying Star sect smashed them into pieces. Sui kept throwing people of the Yunhua Pavilion at the 3 cultivators of the Flying Star sect. In the blink of an eye, over 100 people had been thrown away. They all died at the hands of the 3 cultivators of the Flying Star sect. "What's going on?" Brother Hao and the others pulled long faces. The favorable impression that Sui had created for him was now gone. In order to survive, he had sacrificed his own teammates. How shameless! At that moment, they didn't have a good impression of Sui anymore. Everywhere Sui went, the people of the Yunhua Pavilion ran away. Of course, there was one person who didn't run away, Lu Ming. Lu Ming had been following the army the whole time. He hadn't done anything special. He didn't like to show off. Since Sui wanted to show off, Lu Ming didn't mind. At that moment, Sui threw himself at Lu Ming ferociously. He shouted furiously, "Little boy, go and stop them! Even if you die, you have to stop them!" At the same time, he grabbed Lu Ming's shoulder with his talons and threw him back. He wanted to throw Lu Ming towards the 3 cultivators of the Flying Star sect. But he didn't move. Sui had the impression he was grabbing a planet. He couldn't throw him away. On the contrary, because he was using too much strength, his arm almost broke. "Piss off, little boy!" Sui roared again and unleashed all his strength, wanting to throw Lu Ming out. However, he still did not move an inch. Sui was dumbstruck. He looked at Lu Ming incredulously. Lu Ming was looking at him coldly. "If you hadn't provoked me, I wouldn't have bothered with you. But since you provoked me, I have no choice but to help you," said Lu Ming coldly. He stretched out his hand and put it on Su Yi's face. His hand shook violently, and Su Yi's body was blown away towards the 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer of the Flying Star sect. "Ah!" Su Yi screamed in horror. He wanted to stabilize his body, but he realized that he could not do so at all. Lu Ming's outburst of power was too strong. How could a cultivator of the 1st godly emperor layer be that strong? Die! At that moment, the 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer of the Flying Star sect arrived and attacked Sui. Sui gave a horrible shriek and then his body and soul were destroyed. "That little boy is evil. Kill him first." After killing Sui, one of the cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer of the Flying Star sect looked at Lu Ming. He used starlight to appear in front of Lu Ming and threw a punch at Lu Ming. Boom! Lu Ming was also very direct. He also threw a punch at the other party's fist. He had just broken through to the godly emperor layer, so he wanted to see how strong he was. Rumbling sounds spread in all directions. Then, the starlight broke apart, and a silhouette was blown away. It was the cultivator of the 6th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect. His fist was dripping with blood, his bones had been broken by Lu Ming's punch. Chapter 3976. Everybody was dumbstruck when they saw that. Especially the people of the Unveil Pavilion, such as Brother Hao and the others. How? How is that possible? Brother Hao and the others' eyes were wide open. Lu Ming only had the strength of the first godly emperor layer, but he had defeated a cultivator of the sixth godly emperor layer in one punch, and he had even injured him. Were they hallucinating? Or were they dreaming? At the same time, the three cultivators of the sixth godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect were also astonished. A cultivator of the first godly emperor layer had injured a cultivator of the sixth godly emperor layer in one punch. They had never heard of such a thing. That little boy is evil. Let's join hands and kill him, said the cultivator of the sixth godly emperor layer who had been injured. Godly light surrounded him again. Die! Shouted the other two cultivators of the sixth godly emperor layer. The three of them joined hands and charged towards Lu Ming. Come! Lu Ming's eyes were twinkling. He looked excited. He jumped forwards and moved like a mountain towards his opponents. He also used his full strength. His battle formula had increased his fighting strength sixfold. As Lu Ming continued practicing cultivation, the success rate of his battle formula increasing his fighting strength sixfold was increasing. Now, Lu Ming's success rate of increasing his fighting strength sixfold was less than 10%. Boom! The four cultivators collided. In the blink of an eye, they had already exchanged a dozen attacks. Terrifying qi rolled in all directions. Nobody could stand there anymore. Even cultivators of the fifth godly emperor layer would be killed instantly if they got too close to the qi. Everyone was dumbfounded. Especially Brother Hao and the others. Their mouths were wide open, unable to close. Lu Ming had the strength of the first godly emperor layer, and surprisingly, he could fight against three cultivators of the sixth godly emperor layer at the same time. That was 5 godly emperors. Before, when Sui had broken through one godly emperor layer, they had been astonished. But now, he had broken through 5 godly emperors. They were astonished. It turned out that this was a true monstrous genius. That was what all the members of the Unveil Pavilion were thinking. They all knew that they had made a mistake in their judgment, and looked down on others. Previously, he had thought that Sui was a king and Lu Ming was a bronze. It was proven that Lu Ming was the king, while Sui was the bronze. After a dozen more attacks, the 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect were pushed back. They all pulled long faces and blood splashed out of their mouths. With the 3 of them joining forces, they were actually not Lu Ming's match and fell into a disadvantage. The shock the 3 of them felt was indescribable. Is this my current combat strength? Lu Ming muttered. He was very satisfied with his current combat strength. He didn't need to use other weapons, he could kill cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer on his own. Yes, he was that terrifying now. It could kill enemies that were 5 levels higher. Yin Jiuling, as a Universe Genius List candidate, was able to fight across 4 levels. Lu Ming was much stronger than Yin Jiuling. This was the terror of a forbidden body. In the vast universe, there were countless geniuses. This was the pinnacle. It's time to end this, whispered Lu Ming. At the same time, 4 stone pearls flew out of his wrist. They were gravity pearls. When he was a quasi-emperor, Lu Ming could only control 3 gravity pearls. After breaking through to the godly emperor layer, Lu Ming could control 4 gravity pearls. The gravity created by 4 gravity pearls was 10 times stronger than 3 gravity pearls. Bzzz. A terrifying gravity surrounded the 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer. The 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect were astonished. Oh no, run! Retreat! The 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect retreated without the slightest hesitation. They knew that when Lu Ming hadn't used such a treasure, they couldn't compete with him. Now that Lu Ming had used such a treasure, they definitely couldn't compete with him. They would definitely die. But they were surrounded by the gravity pearls, they were much slower. Lu Ming's silhouette flickered, he caught up with one of them and attacked him furiously. Even if the other two cultivators of the sixth godly emperor layer wanted to help, they wouldn't have time. Ah! The cultivator of the sixth godly emperor layer gave a horrible shriek. Half of his body exploded from Lu Ming's attack. He tried to run away, but it was useless. Boom! A terrifying and destructive chi rolled out. The cultivator of the sixth godly emperor layer gave a horrible shriek as his body exploded. He had been killed by Lu Ming. After killing him, Lu Ming moved on to another cultivator. With the help of the gravity pearls, Lu Ming had the absolute advantage. The other two cultivators of the sixth godly emperor layer tried their best, but it was useless. One after the other, they were killed by Lu Ming. Run! After the three cultivators of the sixth godly emperor layer were killed, the Yunhua Pavilion's army lost their minds and started running away. Die! Destroy the Flying Star sect. Brother Hao and the others finally came back to their senses. They shouted furiously and chased after Lu Ming. Lu Ming stepped out. In a few flashes, he dashed into the army of the Flying Star sect. Every time he attacked, a cultivator at the third level of the Divine Emperor realm would be killed. Lu Ming attacked cultivators of the third godly emperor layer and above. Lu Ming didn't bother attacking cultivators of the third godly emperor layer and below. That way, he could turn the tide of the battle. Lu Ming killed cultivators of the third godly emperor layer and above. The Flying Star sect's army couldn't fight against the Yunhua Pavilion's army anymore. They kept chasing after Lu Ming. After a few hours, almost 60% of the Flying Star sect's army had been killed. A few managed to escape. The entire planet Kuandong was under the control of the Yunhua Pavilion, including the wormhole. They had won the battle. In the army camp, Brother Hao and the others were extremely respectful in front of Lu Ming. Their heads were almost touching their stomachs. Prince Mu Yun is really a peerless genius. He has the demeanor of a legendary king. Today was an eye-opener for me. If I hadn't seen him, I wouldn't have believed that such a peerless genius like Prince Mu Yun existed. Come, let's toast to Prince Mu Yun. Brother Hao and the rest flattered Lu Ming, trying their best to get into his good books. In their opinion, such an incredible genius like Lu Ming would definitely join the Heavenly Palace. In the future, he would even be a high-ranking member of the Heavenly Palace and become an overlord. Naturally, they had to curry favor with him. Everyone, you're welcome! Lu Ming's face was calm. He raised his glass and replied indifferently. After 3 rounds of drinking, Lu Ming said goodbye. Everyone, the mission on planet Kuandong has been completed. I will now return to the headquarters of the Yunhua Pavilion and wait for the next battle. With that, Lu Ming got up and left. After a while, Lu Ming returned to the headquarters of the Yunhua Pavilion. Chapter 3977. When he returned to the headquarters of the Yunhua Pavilion, Lu Ming found that the other participants had all returned. They had all completed their tasks, and were ready to head to the Feiyin continent to fight against the Flying Star sect. However, there were fewer people. There were 12 of them in total. Now there were only 8 people left, including Lu Ming. When the others saw that Lu Ming had returned alone, they were surprised. They were surprised that Lu Ming, who was only at the first Divine Emperor realm, had returned instead of Sui, who was stronger than them. However, no one asked about it. No one knew what they were thinking. The leader of the Yunhua Pavilion decided to head to the Feiyin continent in 3 days to fight against the Flying Star sect and destroy them. The moonlight was like water and the stars were twinkling. It was late at night. In the room, Lu Ming, who was cultivating, suddenly opened his eyes. There was a dazzling glow in his eyes. There were streams of blood in his room. They seeped into the room from the corners of the room and rushed toward Lu Ming as if they were alive. Finally, someone can't wait any longer? Lu Ming whispered. He knew that the 12 of them would kill each other. Out of the 12 people, only the 2 with the highest contributions would pass the test. How could they ensure that they had contributed the most? Of course, the others were all dead. That was the safest way. Therefore, there were only 8 people left. However, it was obviously not enough. There were too many people and someone was going to attack Lu Ming. Whoosh! 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 Suddenly, the blood turned into blood-red arrows and shot toward Lu Ming. Humph! Lu Ming snorted coldly. With a wave of his hand, his palm force burst forth, spreading out like water ripples. All of the blood-colored arrows collapsed. Lu Ming's figure flashed, and he appeared outside the room. There was a courtyard outside the room. At the moment, a red-haired young man was standing in the courtyard. Xue Chuan, Lu Ming said coldly. This person was from the inferior blood tribe, a large tribe in the primitive universe. The inferior blood race was said to have a close relationship with the blood race. It was said that they were made up of blood race members with impure blood. Xue Chuan was one of the strongest cultivators of the inferior blood clan. He had the strength of the top of the 4th godly emperor layer, but it was said that he had fought against cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer for 100 times and hadn't died. In the divine emperor realm, being able to surpass 2 levels was considered a top genius even among the countless geniuses in the primitive universe. I didn't expect you to be able to take one of my attacks and not die. It seems like I've underestimated you. Xue Chuan sneered. His face was extremely cold. Looks like you still don't know about Kuandong Planet, Lu Ming said. What about Kuandong Planet? Xue Chuan was slightly stunned. Lu Ming understood. Brother Hao would definitely report what had happened on Kuandong Planet to the Yunwe Pavilion Master. However, there was no need for the Yunwe Pavilion Master to inform Lu Ming and the others. Therefore, the other candidates didn't know about Lu Ming's incredible strength on Kuandong Planet. Nothing. I'm just curious. I'm only a cultivator of the 1st godly emperor layer. I shouldn't be a threat to you. Why do you want to kill me first? Lu Ming asked. On the surface, with Lu Ming's cultivation level, it was impossible for him to pass the exam. However, Xue Chuan was the first one to kill him. He couldn't help but feel a little strange. Since you're going to die, I'll let you know why. First, I instinctively feel that your blood tastes good. If I drink your blood, it may make me stronger. Second, as long as you're alive, you're an unknown factor. I'll kill you one by one. You're the first one. Xue Chuan sneered. His face was ferocious. You're really unlucky. You should have chosen someone else. That way, you could have lived a little longer. Lu Ming shook his head and sighed. Ridiculous. Don't talk nonsense. Die! Shouted Xue Chuan coldly. His blood qi filled the air. His whole body was enveloped by a bloody light. Then, he turned into a bloody sword light and slashed towards Lu Ming. Lu Ming waved his hand and 4 gravity pearls flew out. He didn't want to waste time talking nonsense with his opponent. He directly used the gravity pearls. The strength of the 4 gravity pearls completely covered the courtyard. The powerful gravity pressed down on Xue Chuan. Xue Chuan's body shook violently. The bloody light on his body almost collapsed. Whoosh! Lu Ming attacked. He activated the battle formula and increased his fighting strength by 5 times. He used the Great Holy Wind technique and the Great Breaking technique. His hand was like a knife. Poof! Blood splattered everywhere. Xue Chuan's body was torn apart. He couldn't be more dead. One move. Just one move and Xue Chuan was killed by Lu Ming. Xue Chuan's fighting strength was only equivalent to the strength of the 6th godly emperor layer. After Lu Ming used the gravity pearls, he was caught off guard and was instantly killed by Lu Ming. Lu Ming grabbed Xue Chuan's interspatial ring and took it. Then, he condensed a flame and burned Xue Chuan's body to ashes. Hee, are you all pretending to be stupid? Lu Ming glanced around and smiled indifferently. The other people who were participating in the exam lived nearby. Lu Ming didn't believe that these people hadn't noticed what had just happened. However, these people didn't make the slightest movement. They were obviously waiting to reap the benefits. Anyway, no matter if Lu Ming or Xue Chuan died, it would be beneficial for them. However, at that moment, these people were astonished. Xue Chuan was killed! I wouldn't have thought that Mu Yun's strength would be so terrifying. With the strength of the 1st godly emperor layer, he could kill Shuechuan, who had the strength of the sixth godly emperor layer. Even though he used a treasure, it's still terrifying. What terrifying strength! It seems that everyone has underestimated this person. With my strength, how could I have finished in the top 2? Thoughts rose in the hearts of these people. Some of them had serious expressions, some shook their heads and sighed, and some revealed murderous intent. Lu Ming smiled coldly. If these people didn't provoke him, he would be fine. If they provoked him, they would be courting death. Lu Ming's silhouette flickered and he went back to his room. Then, he took out a demonic secret skill and started practicing it. He was now practicing ordinary secret skills very quickly. After a short period of time, he could successfully comprehend an ordinary secret skill and turn it into a talisman, and integrate it into his cells. All kinds of demonic secret skills turned into talismans, and integrated into Lu Ming's cells. Lu Ming gradually mastered more and more secret skills. That night, everything was peaceful. The next day, it was still peaceful. Late at night, Lu Ming sensed that there was someone in the courtyard outside his door. Who is it? Lu Ming asked coldly. A ray of cold light flashed in his eyes. Brother Mu Yun, it's me, Ming Yu Xing. A clear and bright voice sounded. It's him. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. Ming Yu Xing was a top genius of the Moonlight Clan. Chapter 3978. The Moonlight Clan was ranked 24th in the list of the 10,000 clans of ancient desolation. They were one of the strongest clans. They were even stronger than the Elf Clan. The members of the Moonlight Clan were the incarnations of moonlight. Ming Yu Xing was one of the strongest cultivators of the Moonlight Clan. He had the strength of the 5th godly emperor layer, but he could defeat opponents who were 2 cultivation layers higher than him. He was terrifyingly strong. Among the 12 people, he was one of the most likely to pass the exam. The other one was the old man who had the strength of the 7th godly emperor layer. At least, they were the 2 most likely to pass the exam. Of course, many people thought that Mu Yun was also one of the most likely candidates to pass the exam. With the thought, a blast of air burst out, and the door opened automatically. A young man in white clothes was standing outside the door. You're here to kill me too? Asked Lu Ming icily. Brother Mu, you misunderstood me. I'm here to talk about cooperation, said Ming Yu Xing. Cooperation? Lu Ming's eyes twinkled. Indeed. Can I come in? Asked Ming Yu Xing, smiling elegantly. He looked harmless to humans and animals. Of course, said Lu Ming. He wasn't afraid of Ming Yu Xing. If Ming Yu Xing wanted to die, he didn't mind sending him on his way. Ming Yu Xing was strong. He could defeat cultivators of the 7th godly emperor layer. Lu Ming couldn't compete with him on his own, but Lu Ming had many deadly weapons. Ming Yu Xing wasn't very talented. He probably couldn't control any powerful weapons. Ming Yu Xing entered the room and closed the door. What do you want to talk about? Asked Lu Ming. This time, there are 12 of us. No, it should be 7 now. Among the 7 of us, only 2 can complete the assessment. The ones who are most likely to complete the assessment are Fu Zun, me, and you, Brother Mu. As long as one of us falls, the remaining 2 will almost certainly be able to pass the assessment, said Ming Yu Xing. You want to cooperate with me to kill Fu Zun? Asked Lu Ming. Fu Zun was the old man who had the strength of the 7th godly emperor layer. It's easy to deal with smart people. Not bad. Fu Zun is old, but he's very strong. Ordinary cultivators of the 7th godly emperor layer can't compete with him. I'm not sure I can defeat him, but with Brother Mu, I'm sure I can defeat him, said Ming Yu Xing. Lu Ming was not surprised by Fu Zun's ability. Those who could participate in the Heavenly Soldier assessment were usually powerful people. Even if they couldn't fight above their level, they were still the best among their peers, regardless of age. Sometimes, you couldn't underestimate your age. Although his potential was limited due to his age, his combat strength was hard to say. Some people had spent countless years to comprehend the quintessence God force factor, and quintessence God force factor. Perhaps the quintessence God force factor had been awakened many times, and many of the shackles of the quintessence secret technique had been severed. From the looks of it, the more times one awakened their origin divine power, the easier it would be for them to achieve breakthroughs in their cultivation. However, this wasn't absolute. Some people's origin divine power might be awakened many times, but their cultivation wouldn't be able to achieve breakthroughs even after a long time. They could only let their lifespan continue to elapse and become white-haired elders. The fighting strength of these people was often terrifying. Young geniuses were strong, but the fighting strength of some older geniuses was not to be underestimated. "Where do you want to do it? It won't look good here," Lu Ming said. "I won't be as stupid as Shui Chuan. In 2 days, we'll go to the Flying Cloud continent to fight against the Flying Star sect. We'll have plenty of chances to do it on the battlefield. No one will suspect that we did it," said Ming Yuexing. "Okay, I promise you." Lu Ming nodded with a smile. "Haha, this is great. The 2 quotas for the assessment are mine and Brother Mu's." Ming Yuexing smiled and left his contact information with Lu Ming. He then floated away without anyone noticing. "Boy, do you really believe him? Maybe he'll turn around and find Fu Zun to deal with you," reminded Guemo. "I just agreed to deal with him." Lu Ming smiled. "Boy, I know you're cunning," said Guemo with a smile. Bone Devil's guess was right. Ming Yuexing quietly returned to his room, but not long after, he quietly appeared in another room. It was Fu Zun's room. "What kind of cooperation do you want to talk to me about?" Fu Zun looked at Ming Yuexing. His turbid eyes were shining with a terrifying light. "You should have seen how Mu Yun killed Shui Chuan, right?" said Ming Yuexing. "Yes, Mu Yun is really terrifying. He's only at the first layer of the Divine Emperor realm. He's a peerless hero," said Fu Zun. There was a flash of jealousy in Ming Yuexing's eyes, but it disappeared in a flash. "Indeed, Mu Yun is a peerless hero. I'm far from him. I wonder if you're interested in joining forces with me to kill such a peerless hero?" said Ming Yuexing coldly. "Join forces with you to kill Mu Yun?" Fu Zun's eyes flashed. "That's right. Among the remaining people, only you, Mu Yun, and I have the chance to complete the test. As long as we work together to kill him, the 2 test missions will be ours. Besides, any peerless genius would surely have some fortunate encounters, peerless treasures, and peerless martial arts. If you can kill him and claim his treasures, you might be able to have a breakthrough in your cultivation," said Ming Yuexing. The last sentence caused Fu Zun's eyes to shine with a bright and greedy light. Being able to help him break through his cultivation was more attractive than anything else. He had been stuck at the 7th layer of the Godly Emperor realm for a long time. He had tried all kinds of methods, but he couldn't break through to the 8th layer of the Godly Emperor realm. He had joined the Heavenly Palace to become a celestial soldier because he wanted to find a way to break through. If he killed Lu Ming and obtained Lu Ming's treasures, he might be able to break through. He was tempted. He couldn't refuse such a temptation. "All right, let's join forces. But we need to think about when to attack," said Fu Zun. "Wait until we reach the Feiyun continent. We'll have plenty of opportunities to attack on the battlefield," said Ming Yuexing. "All right." Fu Zun nodded and reached an agreement with Ming Yuexing. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. After 3 days, Lu Ming and the others followed the pavilion master of the Yunwei Pavilion to the Feiyun continent. The Feiyun continent was a continent floating in the air. It was huge and had rich divine qi. It was the best place to cultivate in the Feiyun Star area. In the past, it was jointly managed by the Flying Star sect and the Yunwei Pavilion. It was also the center of the war. The 2 forces had gathered the most experts on the Feiyun continent. Chapter 3979. However, during this period of time, the Yunwei Pavilion was at a disadvantage on the Feiyun continent. Many experts had died, which was why the Flying Star sect was able to transfer some people away, such as the sudden increase of experts in the Kuindong planet. Lu Ming and the others arrived at the headquarters of the Yunhua Pavilion on the Feiyun continent. This place was like a military camp. At a glance, it was boundless. The Yunhua Pavilion held a banquet to welcome Lu Ming and the others. At the banquet, the pavilion master and the others' attitude towards Lu Ming was completely different from before. They were much more respectful. Obviously, they already knew what had happened on the Kuandong planet. Dong dong dong. Suddenly, the sound of war drums resounded. Pavilion Master, the Flying Star sect is attacking! Someone quickly came to report. Everyone, it seems like we can't enjoy this banquet. The Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion said apologetically. Ha ha ha, it doesn't matter. Let's go and have a good fight with the Flying Star sect. It won't be too late to eat and drink after we destroy the Flying Star sect. Ming Yuesheng laughed heartily. All right, gather the army and have a good fight with the Flying Star sect. The Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion ordered. Soon after, the war drums sounded and countless figures flew out from the Yunhua Pavilion's military camp. Lu Ming and the other 6 were naturally among them. They naturally couldn't miss such an opportunity. If they didn't dare to participate in every battle, how could they earn merits? How could they complete the assessment? Kill! In front, countless troops of the Flying Star sect roared and rushed over. Kill! Lu Ming and the others also roared. The 2 armies and countless experts clashed in the air. In an instant, countless people died and their bodies fell to the ground. Lu Ming condensed a long spear with his forbidden energy and charged into the crowd of the Flying Star sect. As the long spear stabbed out, the spear radiance was everywhere and the people of the Flying Star sect were constantly killed. Every time a person of the Flying Star sect was killed, a wisp of remnant soul would fly to Lu Ming and be absorbed by the jade talisman sent by the Heavenly Palace. Their merits were calculated according to the remnant soul absorbed by the jade talisman. Based on the remnant soul, one could deduce the cultivation level of the victim. Lu Ming went on a killing spree as if there was no one around. Soon, over 100 experts from the Flying Stars sect had been killed by him. Die, brat! A cultivator of the 6th godly emperor layer stared at Lu Ming and attacked Lu Ming. Good timing! Shouted Lu Ming furiously. He turned into a beam of light and collided with the cultivator of the 6th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect. With a loud boom, it was as if the sun had exploded. Rings of energy waves swept out in all directions. Then, the cultivator of the 6th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect was pushed back and coughed up blood. His eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. He couldn't believe that a cultivator of the 1st godly emperor layer could injure him in one attack. 1. In the next moment, the 4 gravity pearls emitted a terrifying gravitational force that enveloped the man's body. Then, Lu Ming rushed over and killed the man. The people of the Flying Star sect were shocked. They distanced themselves from Lu Ming, their eyes filled with fear. Die! Lu Ming moved in another direction. The army was made up of high-level godly kings. Most of them were godly emperors, but there were also many godly emperors. The battlefield was huge. It was a battlefield for millions and millions of li. Some people were fighting in the sky, some were fighting in the mountains, some were fighting underground. Lu Ming didn't see any people from the Flying Star sect around him. Swoosh! Lu Ming dashed toward a mountain ridge. Over here, some people from the Flying Star sect and the Yunhua Pavilion were engaged in a fierce battle. Lu Ming waved his hands and a gust of wind swept across. 6 to 7 experts from the Flying Star sect were killed by Lu Ming. Leaving behind a few people from the Yunhua Pavilion who were in a daze, Lu Ming flashed past them and dashed toward another place. Just like that, Lu Ming killed hundreds of people from the Flying Star sect in half an hour, including a few cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer. However, he didn't encounter any cultivators above the 7th godly emperor layer. Just as Lu Ming passed by a canyon, he suddenly felt a sharp and fierce murderous intent sweeping toward him. Lu Ming looked at it coldly and threw a punch. Boom! Lu Ming's fist collided with a green venomous snake, and there was a violent explosion. The green venomous snake was defeated by Lu Ming. It turned out that it was condensed from energy. However, Lu Ming's body also retreated rapidly. Numerous wounds appeared on his arms. How strong! That's the strength of a cultivator of the 7th Holy Emperor layer. Lu Ming's eyes were cold as he stared in one direction. A silhouette appeared in Lu Ming's field of vision. It was an old man, Fu Zun. It seems like you can't control yourself anymore, said Lu Ming. Mu Yun, give me your treasures and the techniques you practice. I'll give you a quick death, said Fu Zun. You alone? Asked Lu Ming probingly. I alone am enough to kill you, said Fu Zun coldly. He and Ming Yuxing had agreed to join hands to deal with Lu Ming. However, he couldn't control his greed and decided to attack alone. After joining hands with Ming Yuxing to kill Lu Ming's treasures would be split equally with Ming Yuxing. If he attacked alone, wouldn't all Lu Ming's treasures be his? Even though Lu Ming was strong, Fu Zun was confident that he could kill Lu Ming. Therefore, he had been watching Lu Ming since the beginning of the battle with the Flying Stars sect. He had waited until there was no one around to attack. Is that so? Lu Ming smiled indifferently. Suddenly, Lu Ming moved. He turned into a gust of wind and charged Fu Zun. As he charged out, the 4 gravity orbs flew out. The powerful gravity enveloped a large area around him. Divine Snake Reincarnation Seal! Fu Zun hollered. His divine power surged and condensed into more than 10 poisonous snakes, charging toward Lu Ming. Those poisonous snakes hissed and broke through the gravity. They either bit or coiled around Lu Ming. Boom! Lu Ming used his battle formula to increase his battle prowess by 6 times. He used 2 ancient secret skills at the same time to attack the snakes. However, Lu Ming was still no match for them. After a dozen attacks, Lu Ming was pushed back. He had more wounds on his body. With the gravity pearls, Lu Ming could easily kill cultivators of the 6th Godly Emperor layer. However, Fu Zun was strong even among cultivators of the 7th Godly Emperor layer. Lu Ming was no match for him. Die! 10,000 snakes murder! Fu Zun roared. More and more green venomous snakes condensed from his body and pounced on Lu Ming. Even the gravity of the gravity pearl could not stop them. Chiu-Chiu! Lu Ming's mind stirred. Chiu-Chiu transformed into armor, covering his entire body. A silver spear appeared in his hands. The spear turned into a dozen spear lights and shot out explosively. Chapter 3980. Lu Ming borrowed Chiu-Chiu's power and charged towards Fu Zun. However, after a dozen moves, Lu Ming still coughed up blood and retreated. Even with Chiu-Chiu's help, they were still no match for Fu Zun. Die! Fu Zun roared as he transformed into a giant green snake. He traversed the void and coiled around Lu Ming. A green poisonous gas emanated from his body and enveloped Lu Ming. This type of poisonous gas was extremely toxic and had a terrifying corrosive property. Sizzling sounds came from Lu Ming's body. Even Chiu-Chiu's armor was corroded with holes. The poisonous gas seeped into Lu Ming's body and corroded Lu Ming's body. Lu Ming screamed in pain and struggled with all his might. Die! Fu Zun roared as he coiled around Lu Ming with all his might. He wanted to kill Lu Ming completely. Brat, your ability to put on an act is not bad. Bone Demon secretly sent a voice transmission to Lu Ming. Haha, of course I have to act like it. Lu Ming replied, but he continued to scream in pain. I'll fight you to the death. Lu Ming struggled with all his might and took out the Gale Pearl. With a boom, a powerful force exploded from the Gale Pearl and destroyed everything in its path. However, under Lu Ming's special control, it was as if the Gale Bead had exploded, giving off the feeling that it was a one-time use treasure. The Gale Pearl's explosion created a destructive force that swept out in all directions. Fu Zun, who had transformed into a green snake, screamed in horror as his body was continuously destroyed by the destructive force. Ah, kid, I'll take you down with me! Fu Zun roared. He felt a fatal danger. The power of the Gale Pearl's explosion was too terrifying. He couldn't escape at all. Only death awaited him. Faced with such a situation, Fu Zun went crazy. His body exploded with a boom. He actually self-destructed. The two destructive forces collided continuously and enveloped Lu Ming. After a while, all the forces dissipated. Fu Zun's body had completely disappeared and turned into ashes. Only Lu Ming was left. He was lying on the ground and vomiting blood. His aura was weak, and he looked like he was on the verge of death. Another while later, a figure floated over from a hidden place like a ghost. He appeared not far away from Lu Ming and stared coldly at Lu Ming. He, Brother Mu, are you all right? The figure asked. Brother Mingwei. Lu Ming spoke with difficulty. This figure was Ming Yuxing. Brother Mu, you look like you're seriously injured? Ming Yuxing asked tentatively. Fortunately, it's all because of that old fellow Fu Zun. I didn't expect that he would attack me first before I attacked him. Fortunately, I have a trump card. Otherwise, I would most likely be in danger. Brother Mingwei, please lend me a hand, Lu Ming said. Lend you a hand? Mu Yun, you're really naive. Now, hand over all your treasures and cultivation techniques and I'll give you a quick death, Ming Yuexing said. Lu Ming's expression did not change. Ming Yuexing, have you revealed your true face? You were watching from the side just now, right? That's right. That guy Fu Zun thought that he was tailing you secretly, but he didn't know that I was tailing him the whole time. I knew that he wouldn't be able to control himself and would attack you first. When both of you are injured, I can sit back and reap the benefits, Ming Yuexing said. So you were lying when you said you wanted to cooperate with me? Lu Ming said. Of course, I cooperated with you only to lower your guard and let you fight to the death with Fu Zun. Everything was within my expectations. Now, I'll say it again. Hand over the treasures and divine arts on your body and I can give you a quick death, Ming Yuexing said. He was afraid that if he killed Lu Ming, he would only be able to obtain Lu Ming's treasures and not Lu Ming's mystical skills. After all, many people would not carry the mystical skills with them. You think too much. Lu Ming smiled faintly. Then, he stood up directly. The injuries on his body were healing at an astonishing speed. Moreover, his aura was also rising rapidly. Your injuries? How could it be? Ming Yuexing roared in shock. What are these injuries to me? Lu Ming smiled. Everything he did before was an act. His purpose was to lure Ming Yuexing out and make him reveal his true face. Ming Yuexing thought that he hid it well, but in fact, he had been discovered by Lu Ming long ago. Just now, he deliberately exploded the Gale Pearl and deliberately injured Fu Zun. His purpose was to lower Ming Yuexing's guard. Ming Yuexing thought that everything was going according to his plan, but in fact, everything was going according to Lu Ming's plan. So what if your injuries are healed? You already used your trump card in the battle against Fu Zun. Without it, I can easily kill you, shouted Ming Yuexing furiously. His body was surrounded by a hazy light. At the same time, moonlight fell from the sky and fell on Ming Yuexing, making his aura rise rapidly. Bright moon above the sea! A strange phenomenon appeared above Ming Yuexing's head. A bright moon appeared in the vast sea. The moonlight was boundless and illuminated the sky. The moonlight seemed gentle, but it was terrifyingly destructive. When the moonlight shone on it, the space shattered like a piece of paper. It was Ming Yuexing's original secret technique. Bang, bang, bang. When the moonlight shone on Lu Ming's body shook violently and kept exploding. Even Qiu's armor could not resist it. Ming Yuexing was extremely strong. Even though he only had the strength of the fifth godly emperor layer, he wasn't any weaker than Fu Zun. Since you want to die, I'll help you. Die! Shouted Ming Yuexing furiously. He used all his strength to control his original secret technique. Bright and pure moonlight turned into pillars of light which moved towards Lu Ming. I don't want to play with you anymore. I'll send you on your way, said Lu Ming indifferently. Then, a round pearl appeared in his hand. It was the Zephyr Pearl. When Ming Yuexing saw the Zephyr Pearl, he frowned in disbelief. he shouted furiously. How come you have another one? You just exploded. Do you have a second one? I only have one zephyr pearl, said Lu Ming. Then, a strong wind emerged from the zephyr pearl. Wherever the strong gale passed, the moonlight that Ming Yuexing had created was extinguished. The strong gale did not stop and swept towards Ming Yuexing. Ming Yuexing was startled and tried to retreat, but it was too late. The strong wind was too fast and caught up with Ming Yuexing. Ming Yuexing gave a horrible shriek. He used all his skills to resist, but it was useless. His body was covered in wounds. Why? Why? Shouted Ming Yuexing furiously. He couldn't believe that he was in such a situation. Chapter 3981. Ming Yuexing roared, truly unwilling to accept this. I'll let you know when you die. You think you're smart, but I've already guessed all your plans. After you found me, you went to find Fu Zun and said you wanted to join hands with him to fight against me, right? Also, you were hiding in the dark a moment ago. I noticed you, said Lu Ming. How is that possible? This was the last thought that flashed across Ming Yuexing's mind. He thought he was smart. He thought everything was going according to his plan. He hadn't thought Lu Ming would guess everything. In that case, it was obvious that Lu Ming had deliberately pretended to be injured in the fight with Fu Zun earlier. In fact, Lu Ming could easily kill Fu Zun. Unfortunately, it was too late to figure that out. Ming Yuexing turned into ashes in the wind. After putting away Ming Yuexing's storage ring, Lu Ming took out a large number of divine weapons and metal materials from it. Ball, here, eat as much as you want, said Lu Ming. Qiuqiu immediately flew out and turned into a huge metal snake. Back in the primordial divine spirit world, Qiuqiu had once devoured a metal snake and gained the ability of that metal snake. That was, it could devour large amounts of divine weapons and metal-type materials in one go. After turning into a gigantic metal snake, it opened its mouth and swallowed a large number of weapons and metals. Then, it turned back into a ball and looked satisfied. Recently, Ball had swallowed a large number of weapons and metals. Its cultivation level had already reached the peak of the 4th Godly Emperor layer. It felt like it would soon break through to the 5th Godly Emperor layer. Lu Ming naturally didn't mind. As long as he got weapons and metals, he would feed them to Ball. Qiuqiu burped a few times and circled around Lu Ming happily. Then, it transformed back into a bracelet and put it on Lu Ming's body. Lu Ming then left this place and continued to hunt the people from the Flying Star sect. In the next few hours, Lu Ming killed over 100 experts from the Flying Star sect. At this time, the war drums on both sides sounded at the same time, urging them to retreat. Lu Ming flew back to the barracks of the Yunhua Pavilion. When they returned to the barracks, there were originally 7 of them, but now there were only 5 left. The pavilion master of the Yunhua Pavilion saw that Fu Zun and Ming Yuexing had not returned. His eyes flickered a few times, but he did not say anything and let Lu Ming and the others go back to rest. As for the Yunhua Pavilion master, he gathered the upper echelons of the Yunhua Pavilion for a discussion. I plan to launch an all-out attack on the Flying Star sect and fight them to the death, the pavilion master of the Yunhua Pavilion said. Hearing this, the expressions of the upper echelons of the Yunhua Pavilion changed drastically. Pavilion master, you can't do that. The combat power of our Yunhua Pavilion is no match for the Flying Star sect. If we fight recklessly, it will be disadvantageous to us. Indeed. Initially, we hoped that the Heavenly Palace would send some people to help us, but now, there are only 5 of them left. Besides, the strongest cultivators are all dead. What's left is a bunch of trash. They won't be able to help us at all. Indeed. I don't know what the Heavenly Palace is doing. They sent some useless people to help us. How could we destroy the Flying Star sect like that? The upper echelons of the Yunhua Pavilion were complaining. Do you really think that the strong cultivators sent by the Heavenly Palace are all dead? Asked the pavilion master of the Yunhua Pavilion. He looked like an old schemer. Isn't it true? Fu Zun, who had the highest cultivation level, is dead. And Ming Yuexing, even though his cultivation level is not high, I've seen him fight. He's terrifyingly strong. I'm afraid he's as strong as Fu Zun, but he's also dead. There are a few other strong cultivators, but they're all dead. The ones left are all cultivators of the fourth godly emperor layer or below. They won't be able to help us at all," said someone. "You're wrong," said the pavilion master of the Yunhua Pavilion. The upper echelons of the Yunhua Pavilion were confused. They were wrong? What were they wrong about? You probably know that the 12 people sent by the Heavenly Palace are all going to participate in the Celestial Soldier exam. Their task is to help the Yunhua Pavilion destroy the Flying Star sect. At the same time, among the 12 people, only the 2 who have contributed the most will be able to pass the exam. The others will be eliminated. What will happen if that happens? Asked the Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion. They'll kill each other, said one of the old men. The others also understood. Indeed, if that happened, they would definitely kill each other because there were only 2 people who could pass the exam. If they could get rid of the others, they would have a higher chance of passing the exam. That's right. When they came, there were 12 of them, but now there are only 5 left. Did they all die on the battlefield? How is that possible? They probably killed each other. There's only one result if they kill each other. The weak ones will be eliminated and the strong ones will stay, said the Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion. Pavilion Master, you're saying that there are true experts among the remaining people. However, their cultivation, said a middle-aged man. The others couldn't believe it either. Because the remaining people's cultivation levels were too low. You have to look further. Those people are going to participate in the Heavenly Palace's Celestial Soldier exam. You can't look at them like normal people. Every time, there are peerless geniuses who participate in the Celestial Soldier exam. Maybe there's someone like that among this group of people. And the strongest, without a doubt, is among the remaining people, said the Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion. So, who do you think is the strongest one? Asked someone. Mu Yun is the most likely one. Even though he only has the strength of the first godly emperor layer, his fighting abilities are comparable to those of the 6th godly emperor layer. He's a peerless cultivator, and with his trump cards, his fighting abilities are unfathomable. Of course, we can't rule out the possibility that there's a peerless genius among the remaining people. You have to remember that the Heavenly Palace always does things for a reason. Since the Heavenly Palace sent them here, they must think that there's someone among them who can help us destroy the Flying Star sect. Therefore, I plan to attack the Flying Star sect. At that time, no matter who's hiding, they'll use their full strength. We can't continue to waste time with the Flying Star sect. The more we waste time, the greater the losses we'll suffer. Even if we destroy the Flying Star sect, we'll suffer a great loss. We have to end this battle as soon as possible. The Yunhua Pavilion's Pavilion Master shared his guess and decision. You're right, Pavilion Master, said the others after hearing the Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion. All right, gather all the strong cultivators of the Yunhua Pavilion. Tomorrow morning, we'll fight against the Flying Star sect, said the Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion. That night, Lu Ming received the news that they would fight against the Flying Star sect the next morning. The Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion is really courageous. All right, the earlier the battle, the earlier the end of the exam. Lu Ming's eyes were shining. He looked relaxed. As for the other 4 people, when they heard the news, they looked grave. They knew how strong they were. Chapter 3982. One night passed in the blink of an eye. The next morning, the pavilion leader of the Yunhua Pavilion led the strongest cultivators of the Yunhua Pavilion to the Flying Star sect. There were only a few thousand of them. Of course, they were all elites of the Yunhua Pavilion, and they were all above the Divine Emperor realm. In the final battle, quality mattered more than quantity. As long as they could kill all the Divine Emperors of the Flying Star sect, the Flying Star sect would be destroyed. Thousands of Divine Emperors flew over, creating terrifying shockwaves that shook the entire starry sky. Lu Ming sighed. There was a huge gap in strength between a top-notch universe-level force and a low-level universe-level force. A low-level force could be considered a universe-level force if it had a divine emperor. However, the Yunwe Pavilion had thousands of divine emperors. The gap was huge. Of course, there were even stronger universe-level forces. The Yunwe Pavilion only had one divine emperor layer of the 9th divine emperor layer. Some of the stronger universe-level forces had several divine emperors. Some even had dozens or hundreds of divine emperors. Of course, above the universe-level forces, there was a powerful clan. These powerful clans all had emperor gods. Above the divine emperors were emperor gods. The clans on the list of primitive 10,000 tribes were even more terrifying as they had many emperor gods. The higher the ranking, the more terrifying their strength was. Some of the top clans even had people who could compete with the Lord of Heaven of the Heavenly Palace. Many thoughts flashed through Lu Ming's mind. They had crossed thousands of mountains and rivers and were about to reach the territory of the Flying Star sect. Boom, boom, boom. In front of them, the void trembled. Shockwaves swept over like waves, and figures appeared one after another between heaven and earth. They were the experts of the Flying Star sect. The Flying Star sect knew that Lu Ming and the others were coming. The experts of the Flying Star sect who were above the Divine Emperor realm had already gathered and formed a formation, waiting for the people of the Yunwe Pavilion. The number of Divine Emperors of the Flying Star sect was no less than that of the Yunwe Pavilion. There were thousands of them too. Boom! The chi of the two sides collided in the sky and turned the sky into a chaotic mess. The people of the Yunwe Pavilion stopped. Yunsu, what's wrong? Did you bring all the experts of the Yunwe Pavilion here to fight with my Flying Star sect? An old man with snow-white hair walked out from the Flying Star sect. He was wearing a long robe with stars on it. His aura was natural and unfathomable. He was the patriarch of the Flying Star sect. He was as famous as Yunsu, the leader of the U-Cloud Pavilion. He had the strength of the 9th godly emperor layer. What's the point of continuing to fight? Let's settle this today, the pavilion master of the Yunwe Pavilion said. Hee, since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish. The sect leader of the Flying Star sect said coldly. Starlight burst out from his body. Although it was daytime, countless stars appeared in the sky. Beams of starlight fell from the sky. Kill! The pavilion master of the Yunwe Pavilion, Yunsu, shouted. The void exploded as he flew out towards the sect leader of the Flying Star sect. The members of the Flying Star sect also flew out to attack Yunsu. The two of them flew up into the sky and fought in the starry sky. Boom! It seemed like stars were exploding in the starry sky. The entire universe was shaking. A battle between cultivators of the 9th godly emperor layer was terrifying. The starry sky was going to explode. Die! Die! The leaders of the two groups started fighting. The others shouted furiously and attacked their opponents. The godly emperors of the U-Cloud Pavilion and the Flying Star sect were attacking each other. It was a great battle between godly emperors. As Lu Ming flew out, a few people attacked Lu Ming. Little boy, die, said a big man with a curly beard. He looked ferocious and had the strength of the 2nd godly emperor layer. He threw a few punches at Lu Ming. He wanted to kill Lu Ming. But a cultivator of the 2nd godly emperor layer was too weak. Lu Ming didn't even need to attack. He just moved forwards and a strong wind surrounded him. The curly-bearded man was crushed to pieces. Boom! 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 Lu Ming punched continuously. Streams of fist force were like meteors, blasting toward the god emperor of the Flying Star sect. Each of his punches could kill a godly emperor. The Flying Star sect's strong cultivators were astonished. The other strong cultivators also looked at Lu Ming. For example, a few cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer looked at Lu Ming and threw themselves at him. Good. Lu Ming waved his hand and 4 gravity pearls flew out. A powerful gravitational force surrounded the cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer. Then, Lu Ming used his battle incantation to increase his fighting strength by 6 times. He dashed forward and killed a cultivator of the 6th godly emperor layer. How is this possible? The other cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer widened their eyes in shock. Apparently they were stunned by Lu Ming, a cultivator of the 1st godly emperor layer. Then, they retreated at full speed. They wanted to escape, but with the gravitational force, how could they escape? Lu Ming cast the great divine wind skill. His figure was like a ghost. In a few flashes he caught up with the few of them. He threw out continuous punches. Bam! 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 3 cultivators of the 6th godly emperor layer exploded. Their souls and bodies were destroyed. In this vast territory, the other people of the 2 great forces were also fighting very fiercely. Cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer were fighting against cultivators of the 7th godly emperor layer. However, the Flying Star sect had more cultivators of the 7th and 8th godly emperor layer. They had more cultivators. For example, the Yunhua Pavilion had 12 cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer, while the Flying Star sect had 14. The Flying Star sect had more cultivators of the 7th godly emperor layer. Therefore, the Yunhua Pavilion was at a disadvantage. They could only join hands and defend themselves. At the same time, they were praying and hoping that Lu Ming and the others would be able to turn the situation around. At that moment, some cultivators of the 7th and 8th godly emperor layer were staring at Lu Ming. 2 people, go and kill that little boy! Shouted someone furiously. I'll go and kill him! Shouted a cultivator of the 7th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect. He turned into a starlight sword and moved towards Lu Ming. If you didn't come to me, I would have gone to you, said Lu Ming coldly. He rose up in the air and threw himself at his opponent. He had originally planned to get involved in the battle between the cultivators of the 7th and 8th godly emperor layer. That way, he would be able to gain more merits. In the process of dashing out, Lu Ming took out the Gale Pearl and drew out the power in it. Boom! A violent gale burst out and rushed towards the other party with an earth-shattering momentum. The other party was immediately enveloped by the raging wind. The raging wind instantly tore apart the other party's defense. Ah! The other party roared in shock and fear. At this moment, he was filled with regret. He didn't expect Lu Ming to have such a powerful killing weapon. He shouldn't have attacked Lu Ming. However, there was no medicine for regret in this world. He was reduced to ashes in the strong wind. This is... The cultivators of the 7th and 8th godly emperor layers were astonished. Chapter 3983. When Lu Ming killed a cultivator of the 7th godly emperor layer in one fell swoop, the other cultivators of the 7th and 8th godly emperor layers were astonished. After that, the cultivators of the 2 groups had different feelings. The people of the Flying Star sect were astonished, while the people of the Yunhua Pavilion were delighted. He had killed a cultivator of the 7th godly emperor layer in one hit, which meant that he was as strong as a cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer. He could change the outcome of a battle. Die! Shouted Lu Ming icily. He was surrounded by a strong wind as he moved towards the cultivators of the 7th godly emperor layer. He was very far away, and a few wind blades moved towards the cultivators of the 7th godly emperor layer of the Flying Star sect. Each wind blade was terrifyingly powerful. The cultivators of the 7th godly emperor layer of the Flying Star sect's expression changed drastically. They ignored the cultivators of the Yunhua Pavilion and focused on the wind blades. Someone raised his hand and a gigantic mountain appeared. The mountain was gray and golden, blocking the way. Someone took out a shield, which became incomparably huge, blocking in front of him. Some people released a dozen defensive godly lights in front of them. Then, the gale wind blade arrived. With a series of terrifying explosions, the mountain was torn apart and exploded into pieces. The shield was cut in half, and a dozen defensive godly lights were pierced through. 3 cultivators of the 7th godly emperor layer gave horrible shrieks as they turned into ashes. Instantly killed. Instantly killed again. 3 cultivators of the 7th godly emperor layer. When Lu Ming was a quasi-emperor, he could use the Zephyr Pearl to fight against cultivators of the 7th Godly Emperor layer. Back then, his great Godly Wind technique hadn't broken through to the initial level yet. Now, not only had his great Godly Wind technique broken through to the initial level, but he had also broken through to the Godly Emperor layer. His strength was much stronger than before. Cultivators of the 7th Godly Emperor layer couldn't withstand a single attack. How can he be so strong? The cultivators of the Flying Star sect were astonished. Die. Lu Ming didn't care about their feelings. After killing the 3 cultivators of the 7th Godly Emperor layer, he moved closer. The Zephyr Pearl turned into a terrifying wind blade and moved towards the cultivators of the 7th Godly Emperor layer. Retreat! Retreat quickly! When the cultivators of the 7th Godly Emperor layer saw Lu Ming coming, they didn't dare continue fighting and retreated. You have the strength of the 8th Godly Emperor layer, and you want to kill someone of the 7th Godly Emperor layer? There was a furious roar. In the sky, a huge palm print, which was completely condensed from starlight, slapped toward Lu Ming. Everywhere the palm print passed by, the void turned into chaos. Its power was extremely terrifying. Lu Ming didn't need to look to know it was a cultivator of the 8th Godly Emperor layer. Lu Ming held the Zephyr bead in his hand. A violent gale rushed out from the Zephyr bead and turned into a wind blade that slashed towards the palm print. Boom! Some cultivators of the 7th Godly Emperor layer didn't have time to dodge, and were blown away by the explosive chi. They coughed up blood and were all coughed up blood. The gale wind blade and starlight palm disappeared at the same time. An old man wearing a starry robe appeared in the sky. He was surrounded by starlight and looked extraordinary. However, the killing intent in his eyes was as cold as a knife. Who are you? You have the strength of the 1st Godly Emperor layer, and you're so strong. There's no one like you in the Yunhua Pavilion, said the old man with white hair. I'm from the Heavenly Palace, replied Lu Ming. What? What? You're from the Heavenly Palace? Could it be? The old man's expression changed drastically. He pulled a long face. Before that, he didn't know the Heavenly Palace wanted to kill them. I'll send you to hell, said Lu Ming indifferently. Then he threw himself at the old man. If possible, Lu Ming didn't want to kill him. If he was an enemy of the Heavenly Palace, he might become a friend in the future. Unfortunately, Lu Ming didn't have a choice now. The most important thing was that the Heavenly Palace had already found out what they were doing. If the Heavenly Palace found out, they would die. Even if Lu Ming didn't kill them, the Heavenly Palace would send people to kill them. Then, they would all be killed. Lu Ming only wanted to kill the higher-ups. At the very least, the people in the middle and lower levels would be spared. The gale wind blade turned into a tornado and swept across the sky like a dragon, moving towards the old man with white hair. The white-haired elder let out a long roar, suppressing the shock in his heart. He continuously struck out with his palms, transforming them into a huge starlight handprint that blasted toward Lu Ming. But this time, the force that Lu Ming drew out from the gale pearl was stronger and more terrifying. When the tornado and the starlight palm collided, the starlight palm broke apart. The old man's body shook violently, and he was pushed back. He coughed up blood and wounds appeared on his body. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Lu Ming didn't give him any time to breathe. He continued controlling the gale wind blade. Shouted the old man furiously. His entire body started shining as if he had turned into a star. Star Chi attack! The white-haired elder roared. His body transformed into a star, traversing the void and colliding with Lu Ming. Boom! The gale wind blade collided with Lu Ming's gale wind blade. This time, the result was the same as the previous time. Even though the gale wind blade had been blocked, the old man was still injured, and his injuries were even more serious. Now, with my full strength, I can suppress ordinary cultivators of the 8th Godly Emperor layer. Lu Ming made a judgment on the strength of the gale bead. He could easily suppress cultivators of the 8th Godly Emperor layer. The most important thing was that the gale wind blade contained in the gale pearl was endless. It could destroy an entire galaxy. Lu Ming just needed to draw it out. It was much easier than using other weapons. With a thought, the gale wind blade came out of the gale pearl. "Hurry up and help me!" shouted the old man furiously. He turned around and tried to run away. He had already blocked 2 of the gale wind blade's attacks. If he continued, he would be in danger. "You can't escape! Crush him!" Lu Ming used his full strength to control the gravity pearl. The gravity pearl surrounded the old man. At the same time, he released his full strength and chased after the old man. "Stop!" shouted someone furiously. The other cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect rushed over at an incredible speed. Initially, the Flying Star sect had 14 cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer, while the Yunhua Pavilion had 12 cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer. The Yunhua Pavilion had been completely suppressed. But now, 2 cultivators of the 8th divine emperor realm had left the battlefield and been lured away by Lu Ming. The pressure on the Flying Star sect was greatly reduced, and their morale was high. They could finally launch a counterattack and fight against the people of the Flying Star sect. On the other side, Lu Ming was even faster. Before the cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect arrived, Lu Ming's gale wind blade had already surrounded the old man. Chapter 3984. Shouted the white-haired old man furiously. He used all his strength to block the attack. However, Lu Ming had already dashed into the gale and launched a fierce attack. Lu Ming and Xiu Qiu joined hands, holding a silver spear and attacking the old man. The long silver spear was very powerful with the help of the great god wind skill and the great shattering skill. If the white-haired elder was at his peak, Lu Ming would not be able to do anything to him. However, at this moment, the other party was seriously injured and he had to use all his strength to resist the attack of Lai Feng. The silver spear successfully broke through the white-haired old man's defense and pierced through his body. Then, with a jolt of the spear, a destructive power burst out and the white-haired old man's body was torn apart. Even his soul couldn't escape. A cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer had died. At that moment, the cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect finally arrived and started attacking Lu Ming. He condensed starlight into a starlight saber and slashed it down. Bam bam bam! The starlight saber collided with the gale. The gale shook violently, and the starlight saber created a small crack in it. After all, Lu Ming had focused all his energy on the old man, so the gale wasn't that strong. However, at this moment, Lu Ming had already killed the white-haired elder and had recovered. "Die!" Lu Ming hollered. Another gust of terrifying gale rushed out of the gale pearl. A strong wind crashed against the cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer. His starlight shook violently and broke apart. He had the same fate as the white-haired old man, coughing up blood. He was badly injured and sent flying backwards. "Damn!" shouted the old man furiously. He didn't want to fight against Lu Ming anymore. Instead, he retreated to the other cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect. He knew that he couldn't defeat Lu Ming alone. He would end up like the old man, killed by Lu Ming. That little boy only has one deadly weapon, but with his cultivation level, he won't be able to defeat him in a few attacks. "One more person, kill him!" shouted someone from the Flying Star sect. "Do you think we're useless? Use your full strength!" shouted the cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer from the Yunhua Pavilion. They also used their full strength to attack. Each of them entangled an opponent, and launched a frenzied attack, making it impossible for their opponents to free up their hands. They knew that it was the most important moment to win. As long as Lu Ming killed another cultivator of the 8th layer God Emperor realm and helped them, they would be able to win the battle. It was a matter of life and death, of course, they had to fight. Not only were the people from the Yunhua Pavilion fighting with their lives on the line, but the people from the Flying Star sect were also fighting with their lives on the line. However, in that case, it would be difficult for the Flying Star sect to deal with Lu Ming. As for Lu Ming, he was going after the expert of the 8th God Emperor realm who had attacked him. With the help of the great godly wind technique and the strong gale, Lu Ming turned into a hurricane. He was extremely fast, chasing after the cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer. The cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer had been injured by Lu Ming, so he was much slower now. He was surrounded by the strong gale. He couldn't escape. He shouted and tried his best to break free, but he couldn't escape. Boom! Lu Ming released a terrifying strong gale, which turned into a tornado and moved towards his opponent. His opponent used his full strength to block it, but he was severely injured. His chi was weak, and his life was hanging by a thread. Die! Lu Ming wanted to use his strongest attack. How dare you! There was a furious roar in the starry sky. Then, a starry sword gleam pierced through the air and slashed toward Lu Ming. Its power was extremely terrifying. Lu Ming had a bad feeling about that attack. The patriarch of the Flying Star sect had attacked. He had attacked Lu Ming while he was fighting against the leader of the Yunhua Pavilion. I'm your opponent! Shouted the leader of the Yunhua Pavilion furiously. Rumbling sounds spread in the sky. However, that starry sword gleam still slashed toward Lu Ming. Lu Ming had no choice but to give up on attacking the cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer. He used his full strength to block the starlight sword. A strong wind rolled out and collided with the starlight sword. A cultivator of the 9th godly emperor layer was much stronger than a cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer. But the patriarch of the Flying Star sect was fighting against the leader of the Yunhua Pavilion, so he couldn't use his full strength. The cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect took advantage of that opportunity to retreat. Unfortunately, he was too injured. He couldn't escape. Lu Ming grunted icily. His silhouette flickered and he quickly caught up with him. I'll send you to hell, said Lu Ming coldly. A strong wind rolled in waves. Aya! A horrible shriek spread in the air. The second cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect had died in Lu Ming's hands. The other cultivators of the Flying Star sect were astonished. Lu Ming had killed 2 cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer by himself. The balance between the two sides had been broken. Swish! Lu Ming moved towards the cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer. Gather! Gather! Use your full strength to defend! Wait for the patriarch to finish them off, then we'll win! Shouted a cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect. Gather! Defend! Shouted the other cultivators of the Flying Star sect. While fighting, they slowly moved and gathered with the other cultivators of the Flying Star sect. Very quickly, the 12 cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer from the Flying Star sect gathered together, and used their full strength to defend. Lu Ming released a strong wind, but the 12 cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer gathered together, and formed a sphere. Surprisingly, the strong wind couldn't break through their defense. The other cultivators of the Yunhua Pavilion also attacked, but they couldn't break through their defense. Should I use the Xian Ice Rod? Whispered Lu Ming. If he used the Xian Ice Rod, it would definitely be more powerful than the Zephyr Pearl. It could probably break through the defense of the cultivators of the 9th godly emperor layer. But there were too many people there. If someone saw that the Xian Ice Rod was extraordinary, it would be troublesome. Afterward, Lu Ming looked into the depths of the starry sky. In the depths of the starry sky, 2 cultivators of the 9th godly emperor layer were fighting. They were so fast that they looked like 2 beams of light. They kept colliding with each other. Ordinary people couldn't see them clearly. But Lu Ming could see them clearly. He frowned. The leader of the Yunhua Pavilion and the patriarch of the Flying Star sect were fighting fiercely. It seemed like they were evenly matched, but in fact, the leader of the Yunhua Pavilion was at a disadvantage. Otherwise, the patriarch of the Flying Star sect wouldn't have had time to attack Lu Ming. In a short time, it was difficult to determine the winner, but in a long time, the leader of the Yunhua Pavilion would definitely lose. Translator, Transin Editor, Transin. Chapter 3985. Maybe I should try to break through to the 9th godly emperor layer. A thought flashed across Lu Ming's mind. He then soared into the sky and dashed into the starry sky. The others were astonished. What is he doing? Does he want to get involved in a battle of the 9th godly emperor layer? He's overestimating himself. Even though he can kill cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer with his deadly weapon, he can't compete with cultivators of the 9th godly emperor layer. He wants to die. Great! Great! I hope the Patriarch can kill him. That way, we'll have a chance to win. The members of the Flying Star sect were overjoyed. The members of the Yunhua Pavilion were astonished. Oh no! He's too impulsive. After all, he's too young. The people of the Yunhua Pavilion were shocked. They felt that it was unwise for Lu Ming to go to the battlefield of the 9th level God Emperors. If he was not careful, he would be killed by the 9th level God Emperors. But it was too late to stop him. Lu Ming was already in the air. He released a strong wind towards the Patriarch of the Flying Star sect. Little boy, you want to attack me? You're overestimating yourself, shouted the Patriarch of the Flying Star sect icily. Starlight appeared around him and a starlight sword emerged from his body and moved towards the strong wind. Rumbling sounds spread in the air. The starlight sword and the strong wind collided, and then they both disappeared. Brother Mu Yun, hurry up and move away! Shouted the Patriarch of the Yunhua Pavilion. He was worried too. Lu Ming could use his deadly weapon. Even though he was strong, he couldn't get involved in a battle of the 9th godly emperor layer. If the Patriarch of the Flying Star sect used his full strength, Lu Ming would be in danger. Don't worry. I'll help you kill him, said Lu Ming calmly. He even smiled at the Patriarch of the Yunhua Pavilion. Ha! You want to kill me? Die, said the Patriarch of the Flying Star sect, laughing furiously. A terrifying chi emerged from his body. Starlight filled the air. At that moment, the stars in the sky were shining. Then, a shocking scene appeared in the starry sky of the universe. Starlight condensed into swords. They released a terrifying chi and moved towards Lu Ming and the Patriarch of the Yunhua Pavilion. Stellar Cycle Sword, kill! The sect master of the Flying Star sect roared and pressed his hands down. At least hundreds of huge starry sword lights shot towards Lu Ming and the pavilion master of the Yunhua Pavilion. Back off! The pavilion master of the Yunhua Pavilion roared. He also attacked with all his might. In an instant, he blasted out hundreds of palms. Hundreds of huge palm prints blasted out, wanting to block those starry divine swords. However, there were too many starry divine swords. The pavilion master of the Yunhua Pavilion could not block them all. If he were alone, these starry heavenly swords wouldn't be able to do anything to him. However, Lu Ming was nearby. He wanted to free himself to save Lu Ming, but he didn't have the strength to do so. He could only hope that Lu Ming would be able to avoid it. However, Lu Ming did not dodge. Instead, he charged toward the Flying Star sect leader. Not good! The pavilion master of the Yunhua Pavilion was shocked, and his expression changed drastically. As for the sect leader of the Flying Star sect, a ferocious expression appeared on his face. Whoosh whoosh! Lu Ming continued to guide the energy within the Gale Pearl towards the starry sword lights, colliding with them continuously. However, this was a killer move that the sect master of the Flying Stars sect had unleashed with all his might. It was extremely powerful and was even more powerful than the Gale Pearl. In the end, the Gale Pearl was continuously slashed apart. The remaining power of the starry sword lights continued to slash at Lu Ming. Lu Ming's body was wrapped in a gust of wind. He flashed continuously, and dodged the attacks of the starry sword lights. Lu Ming's speed was extremely fast. Some of the starry sword lights were successfully dodged. Die, brat! The sect master of the Flying Star sect roared ferociously. Many more starry sword lights slashed towards Lu Ming. However, most of his strength was still used to deal with the pavilion master of the Yunhua Pavilion. He could not use his full strength against Lu Ming. He could only use a portion of his strength. Lu Ming used all his strength to guide the power of the Gale Pearl. He blocked some of the attacks and successfully dodged some of them. The sect master of the Flying Star sect looked glum. Lu Ming was even more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. He was extremely fast and slippery. It was difficult to hit him. Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion, use your full strength. Use your strongest attack against the sect master of the Flying Star sect. At that moment, Lu Ming said to the Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion telepathically. What? The Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion was surprised. Use your full strength to attack and pin down the sect master of the Flying Star sect. I am confident that I can injure him severely. Lu Ming continued to talk to the Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion telepathically. The Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion was astonished. Did Lu Ming still have trump cards that he had not used? Could a cultivator of the first godly emperor layer really have a way to injure a cultivator of the 9th godly emperor layer? However, he thought of the Heavenly Palace. The Heavenly Palace would not have sent these people for no reason. They must have thought of something. At that moment, it seemed like only Lu Ming could play a key role. The others had not performed well yet. All right. At that moment, he could only choose to believe in Lu Ming. Come on, old dog of the Flying Star sect. Let's fight to the death! Shouted the Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion. Dazzling divine light shone from his body as he raised his energy to the maximum. Celestial Cloud Finger! Shouted the Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion as he pointed his finger. Boundless divine light turned into a boundless finger and pointed at the sect master of the Flying Star sect. Great, I can kill you now! Shouted the sect master of the Flying Star sect. He gathered boundless starlight and turned it into a gigantic divine sword. He used his strongest attack and slashed the divine sword at the boundless finger. Of course, the sect master of the Flying Star sect still had some tricks up his sleeve. He had set up a dozen layers of starlight around him to defend himself against Lu Ming. Whoosh! 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 Lu Ming took advantage of the opportunity to draw out the gale from the Gale Pearl and attack the sect master of the Flying Star sect. However, when the gale hit the starlight around the sect master of the Flying Star sect, it was blocked by the starlight. You want to break my defense with the strength of the 8th godly emperor layer? Ridiculous! Sneered the sect master of the Flying Star sect. At the same time, the sect master of the Flying Star sect and the Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion's strongest attacks collided and dazzling lights exploded. Half of the starry sky was covered by the dazzling lights and people couldn't open their eyes. At that moment, Lu Ming's eyes glittered coldly. Now's the time! A long staff appeared in Lu Ming's hand. It was the Xian Eye staff. The forbidden power surged madly into the mysterious Eye staff. The mysterious Eye staff grew rapidly and turned into a giant staff that was bigger than a mountain. Boom! Lu Ming held the Xian Eye staff and threw it at the sect master of the Flying Star sect. The void shattered under the bombardment of the mysterious Eye staff. That's... The sect master of the Flying Star sect frowned as he sensed danger. If he had been at his peak, he wouldn't have taken the attack seriously. He was confident that he could block it. However, he had just used his strongest attack to resist the Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion. He didn't have the strength to fight back. Boom! The Xian Eye staff bombarded the sect master of the Flying Star sect and the starlight around his body. Chapter 3986. The mysterious ice rod, which was bigger than a mountain, struck the sect leader of the Flying Star sect's protective starlight and exploded. The sect leader of the Flying Star sect's body shook violently, and his protective starlight shattered one after another. More than a dozen layers of protective starlight shattered. The huge mysterious ice rod landed heavily on the sect leader of the Flying Star sect. He screamed in pain and his body flew out, smashing a few large meteorites into pieces. He flew out for hundreds of millions of miles. Blood spurted out and dyed the starry sky red. Many of his bones were broken and he was severely injured. He was too careless. He did not expect Lu Ming to suddenly unleash such a terrifying attack. If he had been prepared, he would not have been in such a miserable state. After sending the sect leader of the Flying Star sect flying, Lu Ming immediately put away the mysterious ice rod. On the other side, the Yunhua Pavilion Master was stunned. He did not expect the sect leader of the Flying Star sect to be severely injured all of a sudden. Of course, he knew that it was Lu Ming who attacked. However, he did not see how Lu Ming attacked. This was because when his attack collided with the sect leader of the Flying Star sect, there was a light that was 100 times more dazzling than the sun. He could not see it clearly. He could only vaguely see a huge shadow of a rod that sent the sect leader of the Flying Star sect flying, and then disappeared. Pavilion Master Yunhua, he is not dead yet. Seize the opportunity. Lu Ming's voice rang in the ears of the Yunhua Pavilion Master. The Yunhua Pavilion Master seemed to have woken up from a dream and threw all distracting thoughts to the back of his mind. His body flashed, and he charged towards the sect leader of the Flying Star sect. The distance of hundreds of millions of miles was covered in an instant. Huge palm prints blasted towards the sect leader of the Flying Star sect. The sect leader of the Flying Star sect roared and flew out from a meteorite. He emitted starlight and resisted with all his might. However, he had been hit by Lu Ming earlier and his injuries were very serious. He had less than 50% of his full strength and was no match for the Pavilion Master of the Yunhua Pavilion. In just a few moves he was coughing blood and his injuries had worsened. At this moment, Lu Ming summoned a gust of strong wind and formed a tornado that swept towards the sect leader of the Flying Star sect. You treacherous little bastard, I'll kill you! The sect master of the Flying Star sect roared as he pounced toward Lu Ming. He truly hated Lu Ming to the core. Lu Ming was really too sinister. He obviously had a stronger killing weapon, but he didn't use it before. He waited until Lu Ming had underestimated him before suddenly using it, catching him off guard and causing him to be heavily injured by Lu Ming. If Lu Ming had taken out that killer weapon from the start, he would have been on guard and would not have fallen into such a predicament. However, he was very weak now. When his attack collided with the gale, it actually did not break through the gale. At this moment, the Cloud Moon Pavilion's Pavilion Master's attack arrived, and a palm landed on the Flying Star sect Master's body. The Flying Star sect Master's body exploded, and only his head remained as he madly fled. Sect Master! At this moment, one of the experts from the Flying Star sect felt a chill in his heart. His face was ashen. Boom! Rumbling sounds spread in the starry sky as a gigantic hand appeared and enveloped the Flying Star sect Master's head. The Flying Star sect Master's head exploded, and his soul was annihilated. The sect master, a cultivator of the 9th godly emperor layer, had been annihilated by Lu Ming. The sect master has died! Retreat! Retreat! When the Flying Star sect master had been killed, the remaining cultivators of the Flying Star sect were terrified. Some of them shouted in fear and retreated. Boom! In the starry sky, a gigantic hand descended from the sky and bombarded a cultivator of the 8th godly emperor layer who wanted to escape. That cultivator's body exploded and he died. The Cloud Moon Pavilion's Pavilion Master had attacked. Ordinary cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer could only die in a flash against cultivators of the 9th godly emperor layer. Set up the formation, defend! Shouted the remaining cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer of the Flying Star sect. The remaining 11 cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer gathered together, and used their full strength to defend themselves. Layers of defensive lights surrounded them. Humph! You think you can stop me? Today, the Flying Star sect will be destroyed! The Cloud Moon Pavilion's Pavilion Master appeared and pointed at them. That was his strongest attack, the Celestial Cloud Finger. A gigantic finger moved towards the 11 cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer of the Flying Star sect. At the same time, the 12 cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer of the Cloud Moon Pavilion also released their strongest attacks to help the Cloud Moon Pavilion's Pavilion Master. Boom! The attacks of the 13 cultivators of the Flying Star sect crashed against the Flying Star sect's formation. Rumbling sounds spread in the air as the 11 cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer of the Flying Star sect were blown apart. The 11 cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer were blown away like meteors. They all coughed up blood and their faces were deathly pale. Die! Shouted the Cloud Moon Pavilion's pavilion master. He threw 2 punches and killed 2 cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer. The cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer of the Cloud Moon Pavilion also attacked. They kept releasing all sorts of deadly attacks. In the distance, Lu Ming was standing calmly in the air. He didn't continue fighting. He didn't need to fight anymore. The balance between the two sides was broken. The Flying Star sect was doomed. 2 cultivators of the 8th godly emperor layer had died in his hands. That was enough for him to pass the exam. Because among the remaining people, no one could compare to him. On the vast battlefield, the killing continued. However, it was a one-sided battle. The people of the Flying Star sect were running for their lives. The people of the Cloud Moon Pavilion were chasing them. Apart from Lu Ming, there were 4 other people from the Heavenly Palace who were going to take the exam. Those 4 people were also chasing the people of the Flying Star sect. They knew that Lu Ming would definitely take 1 spot. The 4 of them could only compete for 1 spot. The battle lasted for more than half a day before it finally came to an end. In the end, the Flying Star sect suffered a crushing defeat. 80% of the cultivators of the 7th godly emperor layer of the Flying Star sect had died. 50 to 60% of the cultivators of the 1st godly emperor layer to the 6th godly emperor layer had died. The rest had either surrendered or escaped. After that, the Yunhua Pavilion led an army to attack the Flying Star sect's territory and occupied it. However, Lu Ming and the others didn't get involved because the sky official had appeared and taken them away. In the starry sky. You've done well this time. The Flying Star sect has been destroyed. Your mission is complete. Now take out your jade talismans and let me have a look, said the sky official. He didn't mention the people who had disappeared. It was normal for some people to die during the exam. Lu Ming and the others gave their talismans to the sky official. The sky official took them, scanned them with his spiritual awareness, and nodded. Mu Yun, you passed the exam. Take the talisman, said the sky official. Then, he gave the talisman back to Lu Ming. Yao Feng, you passed the exam. Take the talisman, said the sky official, giving a talisman to another young man. Chapter 3987. The other 3 were disappointed by the sky official's announcement. The 3 of you have failed the test. I'll take back the jade talismans. Go do what you need to do. The sky official waved his hand, and a wave of energy swept up Lu Ming and Yao Feng, leaving behind the 3 of them to weep at each other. The sky official moved very quickly, bringing Lu Ming's group back to Dream Sky City and into a large hall. This hall was extremely vast and exuded an incomparably dense divine qi that was even denser than many cultivation holy lands. Lu Ming saw quite a few people sitting cross-legged in the hall, cultivating. Cultivate here for now. Once everyone has arrived, the next round of the test will begin, and it will also be the final test. Those who complete it will become true celestial soldiers. The sky official explained, and then he added, Relax. No one will dare to attack you while you cultivate here. With these words, the sky official drifted away. Brother Mu, please! Yao Feng cupped his fists to Lu Ming, and then drifted away, meeting up with several others on the other side of the hall. It was clear that these people were from the same clan as Yao Feng. As they gathered together, they began to whisper to each other. Several of the youths would occasionally glance in Lu Ming's direction, disbelief and shock in their eyes. Lu Ming faintly smiled and ignored them. He went to an open space on the side of the hall, sat down cross-legged, and began to meditate on the great demon sword art. He had originally wanted to cultivate other secret arts of the demonic path, but ordinary secret arts of the demonic path would turn into secret art runes that would fuse into his cells, making them too eye-catching. Thus, Lu Ming chose to meditate on the great demon sword art. Lu Ming had long since memorized the great demon sword art, but comprehending it was not something that could be done in a short time. This was the perfect place to do so. As time passed, more and more people gathered in the hall. It was clear that more and more people had finished watching the first round of the test. Suddenly, Lu Ming felt his skin tighten. Killing intent. Lu Ming abruptly opened his eyes. His gaze was like lightning as he looked in a certain direction. There was a group of people in that direction. There were more than 10 of them. There were both men and women, and they were all handsome. The women were beautiful, and they could compete with the elves. However, these people were all dressed in white robes that faintly emitted holy light. Angels. At one glance, Lu Ming knew that these people were from the angel tribe. Although he didn't extend his angelic wings, the signs of life were too obvious. Whoosh! More than a dozen young angels stepped towards Lu Ming. They arrived in front of Lu Ming in the blink of an eye. Lu Ming's face was calm as he sat there, unmoving. The sky official had said that no one would dare to make a move here, including the members of the 10 strongest races. Mu Yun! One of the taller angel youths said coldly. His golden hair danced in the wind like a mad lion. What's up? Lu Ming looked up and said indifferently. You're really bold. Someone like you dares to challenge young Master Gabbert? There's no need for him to make a move. The next time I see you, I'll beat you to death. The golden-haired angel prodigy said. Let me give you a piece of advice. It's best if you don't make a move blindly. Otherwise, you'll be the ones to die. Lu Ming said, his face still calm. The young angels sneered, their eyes cold. Then we'll see. The angel youth left behind a cold, murderous aura and then stepped away. By the side, many people glanced at Lu Ming. I heard that when Mu Yun was with the elves, he challenged Gabbert of the angel race. They agreed to fight 1,000 years later. I heard that too. This matter has caused quite a stir in the universe. Do you think Mu Yun can fight Gabbert 1,000 years later? How is that possible? That's completely impossible. Even if Mu Yun's talent isn't inferior to Gabbert's, his cultivation is too far away from Gabbert's. How can he catch up in 1,000 years? Indeed, 1,000 years will pass in the blink of an eye. It's too short. Many people were discussing. However, some people also looked at Lu Ming curiously but didn't comment. These people were generally prodigies from some of the top 10 races, such as the prodigies of the top 10 races. Excuse me. At this moment, a young man of 15 or 16 years old, wearing a loose Taoist robe, flashed and walked toward Lu Ming. The corners of Lu Ming's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a trace of a smile. Dandan. He didn't expect to meet again after parting on the dragon race's mother planet. However, he didn't see Bubbles. Dandan came to Lu Ming's side and then sent a voice transmission to Lu Ming. Brother, you actually dare to go against those stupid birds of the angel race. Well done, I support you. Dandan naturally couldn't recognize Lu Ming. Now that Lu Ming was in his current body, his life origin aura was completely different. He continued, To be honest, I've been unhappy with those stupid birds for a long time. Back on the dragon race's mother planet, those stupid birds dared to bully one of my underlings. I've long wanted to deal with them. How about it, let's join forces? Lu Ming's face darkened. Wasn't the underling this guy was talking about him? Back on the dragon race's mother planet, there was an angel race powerhouse who cooperated with the Lord of Heaven of the Heavenly Palace to deal with Lu Ming. Brother, why is your face so dark? Could it be that you're actually afraid of those stupid birds? Dandan continued, trying to provoke him. I'm afraid that you're not qualified to join forces with me. Lu Ming sneered. Swish. Dandan immediately jumped 30 feet high. His eyes were wide open, and he was so angry that his loose Taoist robe was fluttering. Boy, how dare you look down on me? I'm so angry. Boy, give me your contact information for the dreamy divine jade. When the time comes, I'll prove it to you and see if I'm qualified. Dandan was still glaring at Lu Ming. He had always been conceited. Now that he was being looked down on, he was so angry that his liver hurt. Okay. Lu Ming nodded casually, and then he and Dandan exchanged contact information for the dreamy divine jade. Right now, he did not intend to tell Dandan the truth. After all, the fact that he was Lu Ming was not a trivial matter. He must not leak it out. Once it was leaked out, he would not be able to find shelter in the primitive universe, let alone sneaking into the heavenly palace. He would have no choice but to run back to the mother planet of the Dragon Clan. After exchanging contact information with Lu Ming, Dandan left in a huff. Mu Yun! Just as Lu Ming was about to continue comprehending the Great Devil Sword technique, another voice rang out. It was very crisp and pleasant to the ears. Lu Ming was speechless. Why was it so difficult to cultivate properly? From the voice, he knew that the elf princess Ling Yue had arrived. A fresh and natural aura assaulted his face as a figure floated over. If it wasn't Ling Yue, who else could it be? Beside Ling Yue, there were a few young elves. They were all women and were extremely beautiful. Lu Ming even recognized one of them. It was that Hua Shui. On the side, many people looked at Lu Ming and then at Ling Yue, revealing looks of envy. Of course, there were also many people who revealed strong hostility. Lu Ming smiled bitterly. Chapter 3988. What a coincidence, are you also participating in the Heavenly Soldier Assessment? I didn't hear you mention it before, Lu Ming said with a smile. Previously, I did not plan to participate in the Heavenly Soldier Assessment, but last time, I obtained the opportunity of the Holy Seed Mother Tree and my talent greatly increased. Royal Father decided to let me enter the Heavenly Palace to gain experience. It will be very beneficial for my future cultivation, so I came, Ling Yue said, carefully sizing up Lu Ming, her eyes becoming brighter and brighter. You've already broken through to the Divine Emperor realm? There was shock amidst the joy. She remembered clearly that when she met Lu Ming for the first time at the Resource Alliance Agreement in the Iron Sea Star Territory Group, Lu Ming's cultivation level was too low. He was too far away from the Divine Emperor realm. But how long had it been since Lu Ming had stepped into the Divine Emperor realm? This cultivation speed was truly shocking. Lu Ming said that he would challenge Gabbard 1,000 years later. In the eyes of others it was a joke, but now she felt that it might really be possible. I'm just lucky, I can't compare to you. Lu Ming laughed. He discovered that Ling Yue's cultivation had already reached the peak of the second layer of the Divine Emperor realm. She was just a step away from breaking through to the third layer of the Divine Emperor realm. This kind of cultivation speed was also incomparably shocking. It seemed that Ling Yue's talent had also reached a terrifying level. Beauty, I heard that you are this guy's fiancé? Sigh, it's really a flower stuck in cow dung. A discordant voice rang out. It was Dandan again. He didn't know when he had turned around again. Why don't you break off the engagement? I'll introduce you to a young elite. He's my little brother, but it's not convenient for him to meet you right now. His talent is definitely higher than Mu Yun's. Why don't you consider it? Dandan continued. He was clearly taking revenge on Lu Ming. He was still brooding over Lu Ming's underestimation of him. Lu Ming was speechless. Dandan, this guy, still hadn't changed at all. No need, thank you. Ling Yue frowned. She was a little unhappy with Dandan. I'm serious. You should really consider it. That little brother of mine is extremely talented. He's destined to become a universe overlord in the future. Dandan kept talking and continued to promote. Ling Yue's face was gloomy as she unhappily swept her gaze over Dandan. Sigh, what a woman's view. What's so good about this fellow? That little brother of mine is better. Dandan muttered a few words unwillingly, then left as quickly as she could. For a moment, Lu Ming and Ling Yue felt a little awkward as they chatted casually. Oh right, do you know what the content of the second round is? Lu Ming changed the topic. It might be related to the Dark Universe. Ling Yue sent a sound transmission to Lu Ming. Dark Universe? Lu Ming's heart was beating wildly. He had heard from Bone Devil that the Heavenly Palace collected baleful Yin-Chi with spirituality. It might be related to the Dark Universe. However, he wanted to ask in detail, but the Bone Devil didn't say much. He only said that he would understand more after he became a heavenly soldier. Who would have thought that Ling Yue would mention it again? Furthermore, it seemed that the second round of the Heavenly Soldier examination was related to the Dark Universe. What is the Dark Universe? How much do you know? Tell me about it. Lu Ming sent a sound transmission to Ling Yue. Ling Yue shook her head and continued to transmit her voice. I only heard Royal Father mention it a few times, but he didn't say much. He said that the Heavenly Palace has a rule that no one can casually reveal information about the Dark Universe to the outside world. He only said that when I become a Heavenly Soldier, I will naturally understand it more clearly. Lu Ming could only suppress the curiosity in his heart. He would naturally understand after the examination. After chatting with Ling Yue for a while, the few of them each found a place to sit down, cultivating while waiting. This wait lasted for a full 2 years. After all, some people needed a long time in the first round of the examination. For example, Lu Ming's examination was set at 1 year. It was just that they completed it faster and finished it ahead of time. It was normal for some of the examinations to take 2 years. In these 2 years, Lu Ming had already gained a deep understanding of the Great Devil Sword technique. He believed that with a little more time, he would be able to enter the sect and turn it into a secret technique rune that would fuse into his cells. At this time, the number of people gathered in the hall had already exceeded 10,000. Although the success rate of the first round of the examination was not very high, Lu Ming and the rest of the 12 people, only 2 of them had passed. It was only a 1 in 6 success rate. However, this great desolate universe was too big. There were also many people who had successfully obtained the baleful Yin Qi. Naturally, there were also many people who had signed up. At this moment, a few sky officials entered the hall. Up until now, the first round of the examination has already ended. You have already passed the first round of the examination. Now, the second round will begin. As long as you pass the second round of the examination, you will be able to become a member of the Heavenly Soldier. And the second round of the examination is to enter the Dark Universe. In the middle, a white-haired sky official said. Dark Universe? At the scene, many people revealed puzzled expressions. It was obvious that this was the first time they had heard this name. However, there were also some people whose expressions did not change. It was obvious that they had long heard of this name, such as Ling Yue and the others who came from top clans. Next, I will briefly introduce the Dark Universe. However, you have all heard that in the end, it is best not to spread the news of the Dark Universe. Otherwise, the Heavenly Palace will punish you severely, the white-haired sky official said with a cold expression. Many people's hearts trembled as they hurriedly nodded. They did not dare to disobey the orders of the Heavenly Palace. The white-haired sky official raised his hand and pressed down, causing the hall to quiet down. The Dark Universe does not belong to the Great Desolate Universe. The white-haired sky official continued, but after he finished speaking, he stopped, as if waiting for everyone to absorb and digest. What? Many people were shocked, including Lu Ming. What did it mean that it did not belong to the Great Desolate Universe? For example, those small worlds and middle worlds were all attached to the Great Desolate Universe, and still belonged to the Great Desolate Universe. As for the Dark Universe, it actually did not belong to the Great Desolate Universe. Could it be that there was more than one universe in this world? Lord Sky Official, could it be that there is more than one universe? In the endless primal chaos, other than the Great Desolate Universe, there are other universes? Someone raised a question. Not necessarily. The Dark Universe can't be considered another universe. It is different from the Great Desolate Universe. It is a strange place, the white-haired sky official said. Senior Sky Official, are there other universes? Someone asked. I'm not too sure about that either, the white-haired sky official said. Let's talk about the Dark Universe. It is a strange place, and there are countless demons living in it. Demons? Abyssal demons? Then the abyss? Someone exclaimed. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. He had often heard the term abyssal demons when he was in a small world. Later, when he came to the Great Desolate Universe, he often heard it again. However, he did not know where the abyss was. He used to think that it was just a middle world or a starfield. Could it really be the dark universe? If you want to talk about the abyss, it's not wrong. The abyss in the rumors refers to the dark universe, the white-haired sky official said. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.